I'm going ahead and get started. Ryan and Aaron are on their way, but I do want to kind of get ready to go. This is our last lesson in this unit. It's been a unit on having a sidekick, serving alongside others, and you know, you don't do anything alone. You actually help have help from everyone around you, and it's good to always remember to make sure people appreciate or that they are appreciated, that they know that they feel needed. Um, I'll tell you someday. It's a story. Been an interesting week for me, and it's been one of those weeks when I had a lot of other things on my brain to actually get down to. Thinking about Sunday school, thinking about worship, and then Romy's sick today, and Lori's sick, and I don't think Flora will be here. So, but we'll cover it. It's all good, and God is good, and He gives us more than enough grace to do what we need to do. So, our last lesson is on Baruch. And I don't know if you've ever heard of Baruch, but he was a very instrumental guy in the life of a very instrumental prophet, Jeremiah. And the interesting thing about Jeremiah is that we have so many things about his life, personal things that we see more of a window into a servant of God. If you really want to know what it would be like to be in the ministry, read Jeremiah a few times. There's ups and downs. There's bad and there's good and there's all kinds of things. But that's a good teller. That's a good place to go and kind of figure out. Oh yeah, this is what happens in the ministry. And so Jeremiah was called as a youth, and he was at the school of the prophets in the north, in its area north of Jerusalem, Anathoth. And they were always kind of dividing Anathoth. Sometimes it was in the northern tribe, some was in the southern tribe, some was just kind of neutral. And so he was at Anathoth, school of the prophets, and God called him out. And he said, oh, I'm not it. Now, you might say, what was he doing there at Anathoth? Well, that's where he was from. And that was kind of his home. And that's what was there, was prophets. And so did he come from a prophet? We don't know. Was he, destined to be? Well, yes. How did it all happen? We don't know all those facts. We just know God called him out when he was a youth to tell him, you're going to be a prophet. And if you go back to chapter 1, you'll see that call, and you'll see all that God has kind of placed upon him. And he gives him 4 negatives and 2 positives of what he's going to do in his ministry. He says, I'm going to use you to uproot, to tear down, to destroy and demolish. I'm also going to use you to build and plant. Now, you might say, well, a baseball batter, it's, 33% of the time. That's pretty good. But he had a rough life, and lots of the prophets did. We just don't have that visual into their lives. But we know Jeremiah was sometimes referred to as gloom and doom. And he's had to speak harsh words. He had to really be blunt and bold to the people. And he did it in Jerusalem. He did it right there in the city where the kings were, where things were influential. And so he did it in a place where it was hard. And so come on in, guys. And so we're just going to jump right in here. And it's not about Jeremiah so much, though, this lesson. It's about Baruch. And Baruch was his scribe. Or let me get the word here. There's a formal word for what Baruch was. But he was Jeremiah's writer. He was the one that kind of recorded everything that Jeremiah had said and did whatever. And you might think, well, why didn't Jeremiah write it himself? Well, there could be a variety of reasons for that. But some of it was because a prophet would have somebody write it down because it was a record. But in this instance, God told Jeremiah to write it down and to have a record of it. And as we read through the passages today, you're going to see why. Okay, so we're going to begin Jeremiah chapter 36. And you might say, well, no, wait a minute. Jeremiah, why are we jumping in this late in the game here in his life? Well, Jeremiah doesn't always cover things chronologically. And there's even some discrepancy about among scholars. Did this happen before this? Did it happen after that? When did this take place? What was the deal with that? And so we don't always know, but we do know at this point when and he gives us a reference, a time reference at a certain time that Jeremiah asked, or God told Jeremiah to write down all the words that he'd said, and so he had Baruch do that, and it could have taken quite a while. It wasn't like he just went to his keyboard and typed it out. He had papyri, and so there would have been like pages of papyri, and he would have written in down columns on it, and then he would have attached another one to it and written in down columns, and then they would have rolled it up into a scroll. And sometimes these things could be like 30, 40 feet long. So, in order to get them on the spools and to do that. So that's what God had Jeremiah do. And it may have taken him quite a while. And we'll talk about that in a minute too. But here's where we plug in Jeremiah 36, 4 through 8. And if you want to read verses 1 through 3, you'll see that God had told Jeremiah to have Baruch write this down. Okay. So it says in verse 4, Jeremiah summoned Baruch, son of Neriah, and I'll try to pronounce all these names as best as I can, but we us Westerners, we don't always know, but we'll do okay. At Jeremiah's dictation, Baruch wrote on a scroll all the words that the Lord had spoken to Jeremiah. Then Jeremiah commanded Baruch, I am restricted, or I have been banned. I cannot enter the temple of the Lord. Why had he been banned? Well, more than likely because, if you go back and you read some of the messages, he went there and, stood up and proclaimed. They didn't want to hear his gloom and doom, and they kicked him out. So he says in verse 6, so you must go and read this from the scroll, which you wrote at my dictation, the words of the Lord in the hearing of the people at the temple of the Lord on the day of fasting. Read his words in the hearing of all the Judeans who are coming from their cities. Perhaps their petition will come before the Lord, and each one will turn from his evil way, for the anger and fury that the Lord has pronounced against this people are intense. So Baruch told Baruch, son of Neriah, did everything the prophet Jeremiah had commanded him. At the Lord's temple, he read the Lord's words from the scroll. Now, let's kind of unpack that just a little bit. And the title that they give us in our book is to faithfully represent those you serve. The good thing is Baruch didn't go and give some other message and say, oh, yeah, that's from Jeremiah. No, he went. And I imagine his knees were knocking. He was shaking in his boots when he went there as maybe sandals or whatever. But he was kind of afraid when he went there to do it, simply because he figured probably the same thing that happened to Jeremiah was going to happen to him. But I think that says a lot about Baruch. It tells us the kind of guy that he was ready to do. He really believed in Jeremiah. When you go through his lineage and who he was, he was like the grandson of a man named Maaseiah. I don't know, but somewhere in that vicinity. And he was one of the three guys that good King Josiah had appointed to lead in the reformation of the temple and religious reform. When Josiah came king, they'd had a lot of bad kings before, but he was a good king. And he heard the reading of the scrolls, and he was convicted, and he said, we got to get back to doing what God told us to do. Now then you might think, well, what were they doing? Well, they weren't doing what God told them to do. And so they read it, they were convicted, and the people agreed, and they went to that point of being obedient again. So and you find that in 2 Chronicles 34 8, verse 8. And so Baruch came from probably a pretty good line. He had some, leader people. Bless you again. Yeah, okay. And anyway, so he was his, here's the word, amanuensis. He was his amanuensis. That means he was a scribe. He was the one who did his recording for him. And oftentimes people had that. So he, and actually there are even other things. There's some apocrypha books, some hidden, some not canonical books that were written that Baruch may have done some other writing. He may have done some other things in his lifetime. So go back again to the call of Jeremiah. God had put a calling on his life. Jeremiah, as all people, I mean, I have to do is go back and read. Moses didn't really. He told God he couldn't speak when he saw the burning bush, and God said, "I've already taken care of it." I think about Amos. Amos said, "I'm not a prophet, nor am I the son of a prophet. I didn't even come from this lineage here, but God said for me to do this, and so I'm doing it." He was a wine dresser from Tekoa. That's what Amos said. So anyway. And I've said, look, I was a farm boy from Blythedale, and here I am. So when God calls you out, you enter into this human divine partnership. And that's the point that we see here with Jeremiah. We also see it with Baruch, because he was willing and ready to go and serve and be obedient and do whatever. So Jeremiah couldn't go. So Baruch had to go and do it. And so it was several months before a day of fasting came. Now, here's what they would do. If there was some kind of threat or something happening, and we know the Babylonians were coming. They were coming to destroy Jerusalem. They were coming to take over the Jews. And so in the process, they were having occasionally days of prayer and fasting in Jerusalem, and people would come from all over the nation. It would be announced on this day of this month, we're going to have this day of prayer and fasting, and you come to Jerusalem, do it. And if people could, they went. And so Jeremiah said, okay, it's got to be on one of these days when there's lots of people in town, and there's, the town is really hopping. Now, it wasn't Jeremiah given the instructions. It was God giving Jeremiah the instructions to give to Baruch, because Jeremiah couldn't go do it. And, if you've ever read Jeremiah, you'll know they did some pretty low life things to him. They threw him in a cistern. They left him there. They expected him to die. And Baruch, his scribe, for the fear of his life, came and talked to him. And then eventually they were able to get him out. But, it just, poor guy. He's one that I've always felt kind of sorry for. So anyway, why? Why were they supposed to do this? Well, Jeremiah says, perhaps their petition will come before the Lord, and each one will turn from his evil ways. In other words, boy, if they're coming on a day that's appointed for everybody to be here to pray because something's going on, there's a deeper problem than world issues. The deeper problem is there's a massive thing happening. There's a major thing coming. And the thing that's coming is this: you're going to be destroyed. God is not going to hold back on what he's going to do with you. You've disobeyed. You've rebelled too long. You can't keep doing it. And so God's going to stop it. He's going to shut you down. And that's all there is to it. I mean, that's a gloom and doom message, right? And they didn't want to hear it. And that's why they kept kicking Jeremiah out, why they kept doing things to him,